Alright then, let's talk about how vegans are all assholes.
Colin Beavan is an environmentalist and the subject of the 2009 documentary No Impact Man. The doc and Beavan's book of the same name are about his decision to spend a year having zero impact on the environment.
Well, it's about him trying to have no impact on the environment, but he does fail pretty miserably.
Shutting off the power in his apartment, buying only local food, washing his clothes by foot in his bathtub.
And he used Castile soap and borax, which he got where exactly? And wait, where's that water coming from? Surely he's not using tap water. I mean, that shit's been purified, there's chlorine added to it, and there's fluoride in it. You're telling me that doesn't have an environmental impact? Shouldn't he be washing his clothes in a lake without any sort of detergent?
Beavan kept a blog of his experience by powering his laptop with a solar cell.
Yeah, and look at all these scary-sounding chemicals that are used when you produce solar cells. They actually do have a fairly significant environmental impact. Less so than burning fossil fuels, but zero impact? Nope.
And when it first got traction, there was a lot of hate. Not from the right, but from the left.
I can't wait to wipe my ass with this book. My first impulse was to rake these people with Uzi fire while screaming, "Is that enough impact for you?"
No, wait a minute. This can't be right. He's getting harassed? He's getting death threats? No, that can't be true. He fulfills every single condition of privilege.
Typically male. He's also commonly white and or straight and or cis and or raised middle class.
No, that can't be true. Only minoritized people get death threats from people who disagree with their outrageous opinions. I mean, come on, this guy's male, he's white, he's straight, he's cis, and he's middle class. No, he's not getting any death threats. That's reserved for women and racial minorities. Those are the only groups who get death threats because death threats.
Because I've also got emails from some environmentalists that say, crazy people like you give the rest of us a bad name.
Now, Beavan's somewhat drastic decision did not affect anyone but himself and his family, which was kind of the point. So why should people who generally agree about protecting the environment get so angry about how he goes about it in his own life?
I think he explained it himself pretty eloquently.
Crazy people like you give the rest of us a bad name.
Obviously, that doesn't justify harassment or threats of violence. However, for people whose core identity is "I am an environmentalist," when that name gets dragged through the mud and associated with, well, clowns like this guy, they're gonna get angry. They're gonna get hurt. They're gonna feel attacked even.
And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop. And the more I've spoken about
environmentalism,
the more I have realized that fighting for
sustainability and biodiversity
too often becomes synonymous with
anti-capitalism and anti-consumerism.
If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop.
And you can insert most anything in there. German, Nazi, gamer, harassment, progressive, social justice warrior, conservative, woman hater, atheist, asshole, male, rapist. You get my drift. Whatever you identify as, you generally don't want to see that associated with something that you disagree with. It feels bad because no, that's not you. It's kind of why I'm making this series actually, isn't it? Because you're associating me with Angry Jack. And no, I don't like that. But of course you have to remember that I ain't even mad though.
Beavan's wife, Michelle Conlon, and the documentary crew actually had a chance to sit down with one of their critics, and she had this to say.
Aside from making people feel guilty and defensive about their consumer habits, people are very traumatized if you suggest that they should make do without something.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Now, when your friend or neighbor bikes 15 blocks because they refuse to get in a car to buy shitty, expensive coffee because it's fair trade and carries the cup 15 blocks home so they can throw it in the compost, maybe for a few minutes this has been you.
Well, that depends. Is this guy calling me an asshole every time I take a car, continuously pushing me towards his way of life? Because in that case, we're probably not friends. And if not, well, what do I care? He's allowed to take his bike, he enjoys his bike rides, and he likes his fair trade coffee. All the more power to him. We're allowed to be different. We're allowed to have different values. That doesn't mean we can't be friends, and that doesn't mean he has to judge me or I have to judge him. I mean, diversity, right?
Or maybe it's been you when someone declines a bite of your sandwich like this.
No, my response would have been, oh, you're vegan? Alright, that's cool. And then, depending on the situation, of course, I might ask why they're vegan, and we could have a discussion about it, but not necessarily. I could just leave it at that. Alright, you're vegan, I'm not. That's cool. I don't care.
Or declines an invite to your Christmas party like this.
Except most atheists, at least here, celebrate Christmas. It's more about the food and the presents than it is about Christ.
Yes, I celebrate Christmas with my family. Sometimes I occasionally go to church with them. I don't really say anything. It's just kind of a tradition. I sit through it. I like Christmas trees. I like presents. I like being with family. I like pumpkin pie.
But that's cool. You're allowed to be an atheist and I'm allowed to be a Christian. We can have different opinions, except in this situation, my friend is gonna burn in hell for eternity, so...
Or when you offer someone a beer at a party after having maybe a couple of your own, and they decline like this, and you get kind of cold and quiet, and your eyes narrow, and you wonder, are they judging me?
Huh? Wait, what exactly do you mean? Why would you think that? If the conversation goes, hey, you want a beer? No thanks, I don't drink. I will follow it up with, oh, that's alright, I'll drink it myself then. Why would I assume that the person actually means, no thanks, I don't drink, and you shouldn't either, you are a bad person with a wicked soul? It is simply, I have made a personal choice not to drink. You're allowed to drink if you want. Alright, we can both get along and be friends anyway. Cool. And there doesn't have to be any judgment as part of that. The other person is simply informing you.
Why do these statements piss so many people off?
Really? Do they?
Why do they read like judgments? Because they're not necessarily.
That's because they don't. They don't read like judgments.
They're often stated for practical reasons to explain a behavior. Here's why I'm not eating that sandwich. Here's why I turned off the power in my apartment.
Exactly. They're explanations, not judgments.
But the thing is that these people have made some bold decisions about how they live their lives. Bold and inconvenient decisions.
Sure, some of these people have made a hard decision and changed their way of life, but have all of them? No, not really. Let's get into that in just a moment.
At first glance, their lives look less enjoyable than yours.
Wow, that's quite an assumption you're making there.
And it seems they live their lives that way because they feel it's the more rational, possibly even more ethical way to live.
And that's an even bigger assumption. You're assuming that these people have explored all the possibilities and picked the most rational and the most ethical ways of living.
Prompting the question, if they're right, what does that say about me? That's never a comfortable question to ponder.
But how can a personal decision be right or wrong? But let's assume it can, and their choice is the right one? What does that say about me? It says about me that I agree with their philosophy, because I agree that their choice is the right one. So what the fuck am I doing not living their way? Am I just lazy and way too comfortable in my own way of life to adapt? I suppose that could be the answer.
Growing up, most of us just ate what was put in front of us. Most of us believed what our parents believed. Turning on light switches was normal.
Yup, I'm with you so far.
Drinking was what we do at parties when we're old enough, or usually somewhat before.
You mean, unless you're a Jain, a Buddhist, a Sikh, a Pentecostal or Methodist Christian, a Mormon, or a Muslim? And those are just a few examples, I'm sure there's more. People who are raised in these groups within this culture, they're not gonna think that drinking is normal. When they say, no thanks, I don't drink, that's not because they've explored all the options and they've decided that drinking is bad, so they're gonna choose not to do it. It's simply that they are accepting the culture they were brought up in. To them, not drinking is the default choice. Perhaps one could argue that they've resisted group pressure, because in mainstream America, drinking is normal. But that's not really a choice, they've just stuck to their guns, which might be admirable, but it's not really a tough choice. They haven't picked the most ethical or the most rational position in regards to drinking.
We didn't choose these things, they were gifted to us.
Exactly.
And if they're wrong, if they're immoral, then we have been immoral for a good long time.
But it's not really a conscious choice that people make. If somebody grows up eating meat and then in their teens they discover that the meat industry is full of animal cruelty and that animals have to suffer for their hamburgers, that's when they make that moral choice, right? Before that point, anything they did was just out of ignorance, so that can't really be immoral, can it? Because I didn't make a conscious choice to eat meat, it was just the thing that was eaten at the dinner table at home. I didn't even realize there was a choice not to eat meat.
It's not about people who believe different things than you. The atheist probably wasn't born an atheist.
Minor semantic point, but everybody is born an atheist, or at least a-religious. He was probably not raised an atheist.
They probably grew up believing something similar to you and have since abandoned it, have rejected it. The discomfort and the anger is about that rejection. Not that they're right, but that they could be right. Which is not to say we couldn't go ahead and have an internal debate about these topics and come out the other end still believing what we believed before, but in a more nuanced and robust way.
But that's the right way to approach things, at least in my opinion. There's no reason for that debate to be internal, however, at least not exclusively. It's important to ask people for their perspective and their opinions on things. See why this person doesn't drink. How did they come to that conclusion? Maybe you can learn something from it, and, well, if the argument is convincing, maybe you'll change your mind.
But how can we even have this debate? How can we ponder questions like, should I eat meat, or should I consume energy, or should I believe in God, when our sense of ourselves as ethical human beings, not just today, but for our entire lives up to this point, is wrapped up in the answer?
As I explained earlier, I disagree with that premise entirely. It's just so wrong to me.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Something isn't immoral if you're not aware that you're doing something immoral. It might be bad, it might have a negative effect, but it's not immoral. It's not inherently evil of you to do something when you're not aware of the options.
It will always be easiest to just answer yes to these questions because that means we don't have to change and everything's fine.
Well, no. Somebody with vegan parents is gonna grow up not eating meat and their default to should I eat meat is gonna be no. The same with somebody with atheist parents. They're gonna grow up not believing in God, so their default is no, I shouldn't believe in God. And should I consume energy is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. There's no way you can say no to that, so...
It's nearly impossible to evaluate these arguments dispassionately. Some people just double down on the no's, but no isn't necessarily the right answer just because it feels like a hard truth.
Well, change double down on no to double down on the opposite they were taught, and I agree with you. People tend to do that, especially as rebellious teenagers.
Some people select no because they feel derisive toward the part of themselves that wants to say yes. That's maybe why a lot of prominent atheists are, well... assholes?
Oh god, more broad generalizations and cherry picking, I can't fucking wait. However, this video is getting a bit long, so I'm gonna cut it in 2 parts. This will be the end for now.